Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly into a world that smells like incense and, well, cheese. You're wrapped in a woolen habit 2 sizes too rough, walking barefoot across icy stone tiles at an hour of the morning when even owls would say, no thanks. The flicker of a single beeswax candle is your only light, and your breath ghosts in the air. Outside, it's the 14th century. Inside, it smells like curdled milk, damp straw, and sanctity. You're a nun now. Welcome. You probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, I'd love to know, where are you watching from, and what time is it there? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The bell tolls. It's not for you. Not yet. It's for lauds, the dawn prayers, and it's the start of a day that's equal parts holiness and hard labor. You shuffle toward the chapel, your feet catching on uneven stone. You try not to trip, partly out of modesty and partly because last time you fell, your neighbor sister Hilda laughed so hard she snorted, and honestly, she has never let you live it down. The chapel is cold, but at least it's dry. The nuns chant in unison, their voices rising like warm mist from chilled mouths. You follow the Latin, even though some mornings it feels like you're just moving your lips and hoping for the best. Domini, labia mea aperis. Lord, open my lips. You think maybe he already has, but the rest of your body still wants to be under wool blankets. After prayer, the day's true work begins. Some sisters head to the gardens, some to the scriptorium, to copy texts by hand with painstaking precision, and some, lucky you, are assigned to the dairy room. It's not glamorous. You smell like whey before breakfast, but there's a strange, satisfying rhythm to the process. Warm the milk. Add the rennet. Stir slowly, not too fast, or Sister Agnes will scold you. Let it rest. Watch it separate. The curds are scooped into cloth-lined molds, pressed gently, and flipped just so. This isn't just food prep. It's an art form, a devotion, a daily miracle you can touch with your hands. And because you're in a convent where silence is sacred, it's also one of the few times you're allowed to truly focus inward, on your task, your breath, your faith, and the mystery of why the cheese you made yesterday is now suspiciously missing from the aging shelf. Historians still argue whether cheese-making in medieval convents was primarily spiritual practice, economic strategy, or simply a necessity of survival. Maybe it was all three. Maybe it was just a good excuse to stand near a warm vat of milk when the cloister's wind tunnel effect turned your hands blue. Either way, cheese is a part of your life now. A big part. You dream about it. You daydream about it. You write about it. In the margins of your breviary, in the back of your psalter, on the inside of your habit when no parchment is handy. You draw tiny wheels with halos, label them with names like Saint Curdicia or Our Lady of Lactic Mercy, and giggle under your veil. That last one gets you side-eyed again by Sister Agnes, who once wrote a 14-stanza poem comparing the Virgin Mary to a perfectly balanced wheel of aged Alpine cheese. She's a little territorial. You're not sure if God minds all this dairy devotion. Then again, he did let your batch set faster than anyone else's this morning. Coincidence? Maybe. But you take your miracles where you can find them. Life here isn't easy. It's cold, repetitive, and deeply structured. But it's also comforting in the way a lullaby is comforting. Gentle, rhythmic, safe. You know what comes next. And after morning chores, you get a moment of quiet. Just you, a window, and a half slice of something soft, creamy, and inexplicably divine. You chew slowly. It's fresh, mild, slightly grassy from the cows grazing near the old Roman wall. You try to identify the flavors, the texture, the exact level of salt. It's like a form of meditation. A nun's version of wine tasting. Outside, snowflakes begin to drift down, softening the hard edges of the world. Inside, you're wrapped in habit and purpose, and a very faint hint of dairy funk. You exhale. This is your life now. And as the bell rings again, this time for breakfast, which is suspiciously identical to your last cheese snack, you wonder if you'll ever think about cheese the same way again. Or, really, think about anything without also thinking about cheese. You probably won't. You tie your veil a little tighter as the wind whistles through the courtyard, because even saints catch colds, and you've learned the hard way that Sister Juliana does not share her extra wool socks. The sun is up now, such as it is in this fog-draped corner of Europe. Everything smells of damp stone, burning tallow, and, yes, the ever-present tang of fermenting dairy. Your feet know the way without thinking. Down the worn steps, past the cloister garden where Sister Imelda is scowling at a cabbage, and into the small stone building that serves as your dairy chamber. The wooden door creaks like it's auditioning for a haunted castle, and the iron latch sticks unless you kick it. Just once, gently, like you're nudging a sleeping badger. Inside, it's warmer. Not much, but enough. The hearth is already lit, casting flickering light on shelves lined with clay pots, brass ladles, and various cheese molds that look suspiciously like torture devices for very small heretics. The cauldron of milk simmers patiently, steam coiling into the air like ghostly ribbons. Today's assignment: make soft cheese. Again. You'd complain, but honestly, it's the closest thing to therapy you get around here. Stirring in the rennet, an enzyme harvested from calf stomachs, which is somehow more acceptable than using actual forks, you feel a strange peace settle into your bones. The curds begin to separate from the whey, and something deep inside you sighs. It's funny how making cheese has become its own liturgy. Wash hands. Whisper the morning psalm. Check the temperature. Recite the creed. Cut the curds. Fold the cloth. Offer a prayer. Flip the mold. Repeat. Every action is deliberate. Every movement, a practice in patience. Cheese doesn't care how pious you are. It won't curdle for pride or fear. You must wait. Listen. Adjust. Like prayer, but with more dairy and fewer existential crises, though not no existential crises, if we're being honest. Historians still argue whether medieval nuns truly saw cheesemaking as a spiritual act, or whether it simply filled time between prayers and funerals. Some monastic rules mention cheese only briefly, tucked between strict regulations on fasting and awkward prohibitions against laughing too loudly. But in practice, it seems cheese was a sacred ritual, one you could eat. You glance across the room to see Sister Hilda flipping a mold with the concentration of a battlefield surgeon. Her brow is furrowed, her veil slightly askew, and she's muttering something that might be Latin, or might be an insult directed at the stubbornly moist cheese she's trying to dry. It's hard to tell. Your own batch is coming along. The curds are firm, the whey clear. You begin the pressing process, layering linen over the molds and placing weights on top. Carefully, methodically. One too heavy and the cheese flattens like a heretical pancake. One too light and it never sets properly, leaving you with a lumpy mess that Sister Agnes will definitely gossip about during evening silence. The trick, as always, is balance. You clean the tools with warm water and ash soap, hands red from scrubbing. Someone tried using rosemary once to make everything smell better. It worked until it didn't, and the entire batch came out tasting like a haunted pine forest. Not again. By mid-morning, the room is full of soft squeaks and gentle sloshes, the musical background of your monastic life. Outside, birds chirp. Inside, cheese matures quietly on shelves. The air grows thick with warmth and smell, sweet, sour, sharp. If holiness had a scent, you're starting to think it might be aged goat milk. You take a moment, lean back, and let your eyes trace the tiny carvings etched into the wooden beams overhead. Someone, probably centuries ago, scratched a tiny wheel of cheese next to a crucifix. It's subtle, reverent, even. A little joke, maybe. Or maybe a silent nod to the sacredness of what happens in this very room. You whisper the familiar words, "Lord, bless this curd, that it may nourish body and spirit." It sounds silly, but it also doesn't. And that's the weird thing about monastic life. You can be standing ankle-deep in whey, trying to fish out a spoon someone dropped again, and still feel like you're part of something ancient, profound, and slightly fermented. Your thoughts drift to a rumor you heard during last week's silent supper. Sister Benedicta apparently wrote an entire poem in Latin about cheese texture and its relation to sin. You haven't seen it, of course, but you'd love to. Word is, it compared the overly crumbly to the prideful, the sticky to the lustful, and the bland to the spiritually lazy. Sister Agnes found it doctrinally questionable. Sister Hilda called it deliciously accurate. You quietly sighed with Hilda. Lunch approaches. Bread, broth, a hunk of yesterday's hard cheese that someone claims has notes of barn. You chew slowly, trying not to think about how literal that might be. The abbess said it builds character. Sister Juliana says it builds plaque. Either way, it's what you've got. You finish your chores just as the bell rings again. You stretch your back, sigh, and feel a strange satisfaction. You made something today. Something real. Something alive, in a way. Sure, it smells faintly like old socks, but it's your old socks smelling miracle. And soon, it'll feed someone. Maybe a fellow nun. Maybe a beggar. Maybe a particularly spoiled cat. You return your tools, brush flour and curd from your robes, and head back into the cloister, where the wind still howls and Sister Imelda is now yelling at a pigeon. Another day, another cheese. You wake up the next morning with the vague ache of someone who spent too long hauling sloshing pails and too little time sleeping on an actual mattress. But there's no time to linger, because today you're assigned to read from the Rule of Saint Benedict during breakfast. And as luck would have it, today's reading includes the famous bit about meals, modesty, and milk. You shuffle into the refectory, where the nuns sit in silence, hunched like patient owls over bowls of barley porridge and crumbling bits of aged cheese. Your voice echoes through the stone hall as you read. Let all things be done with moderation. You pause. Including the taking of milk, lest the body be overindulged and the soul weakened. Well, now everyone's looking at their cheese with suspicion. The Rule of Saint Benedict is the monastic playbook, a 6th century guide for how to be holy without, losing your mind. It covers everything from how much you should sleep, barely, to how often you should talk, never, to how you should eat, sparingly, and without asking for seconds, you glutton. And while it never says, "Thou shalt make cheese," the implications are clear. Milk was allowed, within reason. Dairy was practical. And nuns got things done. You learn that each convent followed the rule a little differently. Some allowed cheese during fasts, others didn't. Some had elaborate cheese storage systems that rival modern wine cellars. And some, like yours, went full Benedictine by the book, which meant cheese became a holy loophole. Not meat. Not indulgent. Just permitted. You've never seen people get so excited about something permitted. Historians still argue whether the monastic cheese boom was driven by survival or symbolism. Was it about feeding the poor, preserving food, or expressing spiritual balance through fermentation? One 13th century abbot claimed cheese represented the transformation of the impure into the pure. Another just said it kept well in the cellar and paired nicely with dried apples. Either way, you're now intimately familiar with what Sister Hilda calls the Dairy Codex. It's not an official book, but it might as well be. A running oral history of tips, tricks, and taboos passed down from nun to nun. Never stir counterclockwise. Don't press cheese on feast days. Bad luck. If the mold looks like St. Bridget's staff, keep it. You ask why. No one knows. But they nod solemnly. Today, you're assigned to monitor the aging room. It's beneath the main chapel. Through a trapdoor only the bravest mice dare cross. The air is heavy, cool, damp, the perfect climate for patience and penance. Rows of wooden shelves bow under wheels of cheese, some soft and moldy, others hard and dense like forgotten sins. Each wheel is tagged with a small wax seal, dated, marked with initials, and sometimes labeled with little doodles. Sister Agnes once etched a tiny angel into the side of her brie. It was promptly nibbled by mice. Divine retribution? Hard to say. As you inspect the cheeses, flipping them gently, you spot something strange. A small wheel with no tag. Unmarked. Unclaimed. The rind is thick and dusty, but there's a faint indentation, a cross, maybe, or a flower. You ask Sister Juliana about it, and she squints, sniffs, and declares it either from 50 years ago or last week. She's not sure. But she adds, if it doesn't kill us, it's probably fine. You decide not to risk it. Yet. Lunch comes and goes, the usual parade of root vegetables and crusty bread. You're grateful for the half slice of yesterday's curd, still tangy and cool. The cheese never lasts long. And no one ever says where it all goes. There's a rumor, of course, that some of it gets smuggled to the bishop's table. That nuns are secretly producing high-end cheese under fake names and sending it off in wax-sealed crates. You picture Sister Gertrude in a hooded cloak, delivering forbidden dairy under cover of darkness. It's probably not true. But then again, you did see her with that unusually fancy goat last week. After lunch, you're back in the dairy chamber, cleaning the giant copper cauldron. It takes two of you to scrub off the milk crust. Sister Hilda starts humming a hymn, and soon the room fills with soft voices. Someone changes the lyrics to include cheese puns. You join in, poorly. It's the closest thing to joy you've had since last week's cider ration. You take a moment to admire your reflection in the polished brass ladle. Your face is flushed, your veil askew, and your nose is dusted with powdered whey. You look like a saint from a very specific niche painting, Our Lady of Lactose. That evening, during Compline prayers, you notice something in the Psalms that never hit you before. The phrase, land flowing with milk and honey. You've heard it 100 times. But now, sitting cross-legged with the scent of cheese still clinging to your sleeves, it hits different. You wonder if heaven smells like camembert. You drift off to sleep later with your hands still faintly sore, your mind humming with prayers, and your dreams oddly populated by talking wheels of cheese giving spiritual advice. One tells you to be patient. Another insists you're oversalting your batches. You nod. Maybe they're right. You wake up to the sharp crack of wood splitting in the courtyard. Someone's chopping firewood again. Probably Sister Imelda, judging by the string of very un-nun-like grumbles echoing through the frosty air. You wrap your wool shawl tighter and peer out the small window. The morning fog hasn't lifted. Everything looks dipped in gray. But you've got bigger problems. It's butter duty day. Yes, cheese's greasier, moodier cousin is your responsibility now. And while cheese gets poems, praise, and sometimes spiritual metaphors, butter is, well, less glamorous. But you drag yourself to the dairy house anyway, boots squelching through mud, hands already cold before you touch a single churn. Inside, the churn looms like a squat, wooden dragon. It creaks ominously when you open it, as if warning you, this will take forever, and your arms will feel like soup afterward. And it's not wrong. You pour in the cream, a pale, thick slosh that smells faintly of grass and goat, and begin to turn the handle. Slowly, steadily, like you're coaxing secrets from a very stubborn ghost. Turns out, butter making takes ages. Churning cream into golden, spreadable fat is less of a process and more of a test of your will to live. You churn. You pray. You churn again. Somewhere around minute 30, you start seeing your ancestors in the steam. Still, there's a rhythm to it. A dull, hypnotic repetition that pulls your thoughts inward. You wonder about all the other nuns across the centuries, arms aching, sweat dripping into their wimples, muttering under their breath about how Saint Bridget never had to deal with this nonsense. Or did she? Historians still argue whether early monastic women viewed butter as part of their sacred food rituals or simply a practical necessity. Some sources suggest butter was considered almost medicinal, used in treating wounds, soothing chapped lips, or bribing grumpy abbots. One particularly ancient recipe lists Butyrum sanctum as an anointing oil. Whether they were making holy balm or toast topping is, well, still open for debate. Eventually, the butter separates. You skim off the buttermilk, saving it for baking, and press the golden lump into a wooden mold. This one's carved with a little cross. It'll make the butter look pious, which somehow makes it taste better, or so says Sister Juliana. She sweeps into the room just as you're scraping the last sticky bits from the churn, and without missing a beat, pops a finger into the fresh butter and tastes it. Too grainy, she mutters, then walks out like a culinary angel of judgment. You want to scream. Instead, you just say a small, salty prayer. Afternoon brings a surprise visit. A neighboring monk from the Benedictine abbey down the road has arrived with a cart of barley and a suspiciously well-fed donkey. He's brought cheese for trade, and it's fancy. Like, you need to invent 3 new sins to describe how creamy it is, fancy. You try a tiny bite, your pupils dilate. Sister Hilda whispers, "Heaven help us, this is monastic contraband." He asks about your cheeses in return. You mention your soft rounds and herb-rubbed bricks and try not to sound too proud, but he raises an eyebrow. "Any with lavender?" You blink. Lavender. He explains that at his abbey, they've been experimenting. Yes, experimenting, with floral rinds and dried herbs. God gave us taste buds, he says with a wink. Why not use them? You're scandalized. And intrigued. Mostly intrigued. That night, at supper, you can't stop thinking about it. Could you slip some crushed thyme into your next batch? Maybe a whisper of sage? Is that allowed? Would it be delicious? Would it be heresy? Sister Agnes eyes you across the table, as if sensing your inner flavor rebellion. Later, while scrubbing pots, Sister Hilda confesses she's been aging a secret wheel under her bed. She says it's infused with ale. You almost faint. There's a whole underground cheese scene, apparently. Quiet experiments. Midnight mold scrapes. Forbidden flavors. You feel like you've just discovered the Holy Grail, but it smells like onions and tastes like heaven. You ask if there are records, written ones. She nods. In the old cookbook. She means the Liber KCI, the Book of Cheese. It's kept locked in the library, bound in cracked leather and written half in Latin, half in frantic shorthand only 3 people can read. Inside, you'll find everything from cheese-salt ratios to poetic cheese prayers. One entry simply reads, "If curd weeps, kneel." You've never quite figured that one out. Historians love the Liber KCI. Some say it was copied from a 9th century French manuscript. Others argue it was entirely local, passed down from nun to nun, like a sacred dairy whisper. The recipes are messy, inconsistent, and wildly unhelpful. One suggests aging cheese until the moon frowns. Another calls for a spoonful of the quietest milk. Still, it's tradition. And around here, tradition is just theology with better snacks. You fall asleep that night, fingers still tingling from churning, head spinning with thoughts of lavender wheels and butter crosses and cheese poems hidden between pages of scripture. In your dream, a cheese wheel opens its eyes and says, "Balance the salt and the soul." You nod, understanding completely. You're woken by bells again. 4 short rings, 1 long. That means it's market day. Which, in nun terms, is about as close as you're going to get to the rush of Times Square. You rub your eyes, pull on your worn cloak, and make your way to the cloister yard where the cart is already half loaded with bundles of turnips, dried herbs, and of course, cheese. But not just any cheese. Today, you're taking the special wheels, the ones aged in clay pots and rubbed down weekly with vinegar and salt. The ones Sister Agnes blesses before wrapping them in linen. The ones so precious, they're stored behind the statue of Saint Scholastica, who, ironically, probably didn't care for dairy. These wheels are bound for town, and you're going with them. Sort of. You don't get to go to market, of course. That's a job for Brother Martin from the nearby abbey. He's the designated go-between, a man with calloused hands, a thick beard, and the eternal scent of sheep. He arrives just after sunrise, nodding solemnly as he inspects the wheels. "Softer than last batch," he murmurs. "Smells like a good spring." You watch him stack the wheels into baskets lined with straw. You can't help but feel a little like a parent sending their child off to boarding school. Except the child is a stinky dairy product, and boarding school is a market square full of fishmongers and apple sellers yelling over each other. Still, you feel pride. These cheeses aren't just food, they're trade, reputation, diplomacy. Medieval convents didn't exactly have Patreon or Etsy shops. They had cheese. Cheese bought parchment. Cheese earned favor. Cheese even smoothed over ecclesiastical squabbles. The bishop may ignore your letters, but a wheel of rosemary-washed sheep's milk? Suddenly he's answering within the week. Historians still argue whether monastic trade like this was officially sanctioned or cleverly informal. Technically, monasteries weren't supposed to profit, but they could accept donations. And sometimes those donations just happen to follow after a gift of cheese. A coincidence, surely. As the cart rolls out, you return to the scriptorium. Not to copy scripture today, but to write cheese labels. Yes, you heard that right. In this convent, labeling is an art form. Every will gets a parchment slip, date, milk type, and something called a spirit note. That's Sister Juliana's invention. A little line that reflects the mood of the batch. Some examples. Made during thunderstorm. Sharp. Mixed during feast prep. Distracted. Goat was angry. Texture unpredictable. You sit at the long desk with your quill and think. Your last batch was made during a particularly chaotic morning. Someone fainted, the cat stole an egg, and the salter caught fire. Don't ask. So you write. Flustered but faithful. Slightly tangy. Perfect. Just as you're drying the ink, Sister Hilda appears with a tiny wooden box. She opens it reverently to reveal a cheese seal. It's carved ivory, shaped like a wheel, with the letters SCA, Sancta Clari Abbatia. You gasp. That's the original seal from the founding of the convent. Only the eldest nuns get to use it. It marks a cheese as heritage quality. Usually reserved for solemn days. Or bribes. She hands it to you. Use it well. And don't drop it in the way. You don't. Later that afternoon, a buzz sweeps through the convent. The traveling priest is arriving tomorrow. Which means two things, Mass and cheese gifts. You're assigned to prepare a platter. It must be humble but impressive. Modest but rich in character. You agonize over the selection. Should you include the bold goat's cheese rolled in ash? Or is that too provocative? Eventually, you settle on a trio. A soft cow's milk round, infused with marjoram. A firm wheel aged with cracked pepper and clover honey. A blue-veined experiment that might be a revelation or might be a mistake. You arrange them on a clay dish, garnished with fresh mint, and feel, briefly, like a culinary Michelangelo. Evening prayers are oddly restless. Everyone's distracted. What will the priest say? Will he notice the clover? Will he ask for more? Sister Agnes whispers that once, years ago, a cardinal ate her fennel cheese and sent a letter of thanks sealed with a ring imprint. It's kept in the library. No one's allowed to touch it. And yet here you are, 50 fingers deep in curds all day, whispering prayers into bubbling milk, and suddenly, you're making diplomacy out of dairy. That night, by candlelight, you peek into the old cheese ledger again. You find a page smudged with soot and ink, half a recipe, half a diary entry. It reads, "This batch was made under comet sky, tasted of time and longing. Sister Beatrix said it made her cry. I said that's just the salt." You smile. Then you flip to the back and find a single line. "If the cheese sings, do not fear it. Listen." You don't know what it means. But you believe it. As you lie in your bunk, listening to the faint bleats of goats and the comforting creak of old wood beams, you wonder if your cheese tomorrow will sing. And what it might say. The traveling priest arrives just after terce, robes fluttering, face flushed from the uphill walk. He smells faintly of myrrh and horse, and when he bows, the tassels on his stole nearly knock over the jug of cider on the table. You watch from a respectful distance, cheese platter balanced in your hands like a sacred offering. He smiles politely, accepts the gift, doesn't comment. You try not to feel crushed. But then, as the others file into the chapel, he turns and says, "This one with the marjoram, bless whoever made it. It's contemplative. Contemplative. You melt a little." During Mass, your mind wanders, as it always does when the incense starts curling just so. The priest chants, the light slants in through stained glass, and suddenly all you can think about is cheesecloth and how hard it is to keep clean. You still haven't figured out who keeps sneaking theirs into the laundry pile without rinsing it first. Probably Sister Magda. She has the face of a cheesecloth criminal. After the service, the priest sits for a theological refreshment, which is a fancy way of saying, he eats and we wait. He asks questions between bites, about the garden, the new bell tower repairs, and, yes, the cheese. He wants to know what kinds you make, what herbs you grow, whether you've ever tried aging it in wine barrels. You blink. Wine barrels. Apparently, in the South, some monks do just that. Oak casks, reused from sacramental wine, repurposed to age cheese in dark, cool cellars. He says the flavor is elevated. You imagine a cheese so holy it actually levitates. Historians still argue whether such experiments were widespread or just isolated flashes of dairy genius. Some claim wine barrel cheese began in Burgundy. Others think it was a northern invention, born out of necessity when a shipment of salt failed to arrive and someone said, just dunk it in leftover claret. That night, inspired, you wander out to the tool shed where the convent stores its own empty wine barrels, used mostly for collecting rainwater now. You tap on one. Hollow. Smells faintly of old feast days. You get an idea. You tell no one. Instead, over the next few days, you smuggle a small wheel of your own blend, goat and sheep, with a dash of juniper, into the barrel. Just one. You mark the top with chalk. Experimentum. You whisper a quick prayer. You seal it up. Back in the dairy, regular duties await. Boiling milk, straining curds, chasing off the convent's ever-curious cat. He's developed a taste for whey. You try to lecture him on the rule of Saint Benedict. He blinks, then licks the pail. Sister Hilda mentions, offhandedly, that the cat might be possessed. Sister Juliana says the cat is a gift from God. Sister Magda just says, "It's a cat," and moves on. You're starting to think the convent should write a separate book of cheese and cats. During a rare afternoon break, you and a few others sit in the garden, weaving herb bundles and gossiping gently. "Did you hear the priest asked for a second plate?" one says. "Probably just hungry." "No, he asked specifically for the blue one." You nearly drop your sage twigs. Blue cheese in this convent is controversial. It's strong. It's unpredictable. One time it grew a stripe down the middle that looked suspiciously like St. Peter, and Sister Agnes declared it either divine or dangerous. The jury's still out. Still, you can't help feeling a little smug. Your blue batch may not be canonized yet, but it got a priest to come back for seconds. That night, back in your cell, you scribble into your personal notebook, a small, palm-sized book you hide beneath your mattress. Day 143. Experimentum still aging. Smells. Confident. No visible mold yet, but it feels like it's planning something. You pause. Then add, "If it grows legs, I shall consider it a miracle." You stare at the ceiling. Somewhere, the cat knocks over a pail. Distant bleats echo in the yard. You wonder if nuns 100 years ago also lay awake, thinking about mold colonies and market prices. Probably. There's a kind of timelessness to it all. Cheese doesn't rush. It doesn't fret. It just becomes. You start to understand why so many of your sisters write about it. Not just in recipe books, but in their diaries, their letters, even in the margins of prayer scrolls. One scrap, folded neatly into a psalter, reads, "Let the curd rest. God rests. So shall I." Another, barely legible, says, "Was fasting, dreamed of cheese, felt unholy joy." It's everywhere, woven into the fabric of convent life like thread through linen. Historians, of course, debate what all this writing really means. Some argue it's metaphor, that cheese became a stand-in for spiritual practice, slow, quiet, faithful. Others say it's just proof that monastic life needed outlets, any outlets, for expression and joy. You think maybe it's both. Because cheese, in its own weird way, connects you to the animals, to the land, to each other, to time itself. And maybe, when your wheel in the wine barrel is finally ready, it will tell you something you didn't know about patience, or flavor, or yourself. Until then, you wait. Weeks pass. The wine barrel experiment slumbers on in its oak cocoon, and you, too, are learning the art of waiting. Not the passive kind, but the monastic kind. The kind with purpose. You age alongside it, in a way. Each morning you tend the other cheeses, the regular batches, flipping, rubbing, humming a little hymn under your breath because the rhythm keeps your hands steady. Outside, the days stretch longer. Spring slips quietly into summer, and with it comes a different pace. The animals molt, the herbs bolt, and the sun begins to bully the stone walls of the convent until even the coldest corner of the cheese cellar feels vaguely sweaty. That's when the maggots arrive. No one warns you about this part of cheesemaking in your initiation. They tell you about the prayers, the silence, the rules, but not the part where you open a linen-wrapped wheel and find it, wriggling, alive. Your first instinct is to scream. Your second is to torch it. But Sister Hilda, cool as a snowdrift, simply peers over your shoulder and nods. "Don't touch it," she says. "It's still deciding." Historians still argue whether maggot-ripened cheeses, like the infamous Sardinian casu marzu, ever existed in medieval Europe proper. Some say yes, tucked away in remote villages where the cheese was left to the mercy of nature. Others claim the church banned such corrupt cheeses outright, citing health, or perhaps just squeamishness. But here, in this convent, they're treated with wary respect. Not encouraged, but not always discarded either. Some nuns say they can taste heaven in them. Others say that's probably just early onset nausea. You decide to bury the offending wheel in the compost heap and pray for its soul. The next day, you begin a new batch with extra caution. As you work, Sister Juliana tells you a story about a nun from centuries ago, Sister Odelia, who allegedly composed an entire hymn inspired by cheese. A real one. In Latin. You raise an eyebrow. She compared the softening of curds, Juliana says, to the softening of a hardened heart. That's poetry. You ask if the music still exists. Maybe. Or maybe it melted. You laugh, then realize she's not joking. The idea of cheese-based theology follows you for the rest of the day. It's oddly comforting. You start to see gospel metaphors everywhere. Milk transforming through effort and time into something whole. The curd, the press, the aging, the patience of it all. Even the cat becomes a sort of monastic metaphor. You watch him perch on the ledge above the dairy, observing everything with the silent judgment of Saint Jerome. You swear he nods approvingly when your curds break clean. One evening, while wrapping a particularly aromatic batch of herb brine cheese, you find a scrap of parchment stuffed behind a loose stone. You unfurl it carefully. It's stained with grease and time, but the ink is legible. The wheel cracked at dawn. Sister Mirabelle wept. I told her the cracks are blessings in disguise. Air enters. Change begins. Cheese, like people, needs to breathe. You blink. It's poetry, or a confession, or both. That night, during Compline, you can't stop thinking about cracks. Because, earlier, you noticed one. In the wine barrel. Barely visible at first, a tiny hairline fracture along the bottom. But it's there. And that means air is entering. Change is beginning. You don't know if this is a blessing or a catastrophe. Historians would likely call this a natural fermentation event. You call it mildly terrifying. Still, you don't intervene. Not yet. You mark the date in your notebook. You whisper a line from that hidden parchment. And you wait. Sister Magda, ever skeptical, sees you hovering near the barrel and raises an eyebrow. If it hatches, I'm not naming it, she says. You chuckle, but her words sit in your mind longer than expected. What if it hatches? What would that even mean? You push the thought away and focus on your next assignment, transcribing the old cheese records. These aren't theological tomes. They're daily logs, barely legible sometimes, often scribbled in margins. But they reveal more about the convent's history than any illuminated manuscript ever could. You discover that the convent once entered a regional cheese competition, and won. You learn that during a harsh winter, the sisters survived almost entirely on smoked curd and carrot mash. You find a note that simply reads, "New cow. Name, Euphemia. Attitude, holy terror." These records are dry, yes. But they're also oddly alive. A pulse beneath the parchment. You notice something else, too. The older the entries get, the more poetic the language becomes. One early recipe begins with, "Bless the beast who gave. Bless the hands who shape. May this cheese not curdle like Brother Jerome's temper." Another includes an actual drawing of a smiling wheel with arms, labeled Saint Fromage the Mild. You show it to Sister Hilda. She shrugs. Some saints are unofficial. This, more than anything, convinces you. The nuns who came before weren't just making food. They were making meaning. One wheel at a time. And maybe, someday, someone will find your own notes and wonder who you were. Maybe they'll laugh at your line about cracks and cats. Maybe they'll find the wine barrel cheese and write another poem. You begin to write your own recipe in verse. Take the milk from morning's grace. Heat with care, no hurried pace. Stir as gently as you pray. Let the curd find its own way. You pause. Smile. Then add. If it smells like destiny, proceed. A heavy rain rolls in overnight. The kind that drapes the world in damp wool and turns the herb garden into a swamp. You wake to the drumming of fat drops on the roof, and for a moment, you just lie there, counting each plink like a sleepy rosary. When you finally rise and shuffle into your sandals, your thoughts float, like the mist creeping through the cloister, straight to the wine barrel. You sneak down before lauds. It's still there. Of course it's still there. No one has moved it, no one but you even touches it. The crack has widened slightly, a tiny bead of moisture at its edge. You imagine the cheese inside stretching and groaning, the way bread sighs in an oven. Not quite alive, but not quite asleep either. And yes, there it is, the faintest, most stubbornly complex smell. Sharp, but rich. Like old stories. You step back, heart beating faster than any matins bell. You've created something. Something real. Something possibly edible. You leave it untouched, for now. You're not ready. Back in the dairy, the milk arrives late. The donkey cart got stuck in mud, and Brother Alphonse, who manages the barn, arrives covered in muck and looking like a disappointed potato. "We lost a bucket," he mutters. "The goats are in a mood." Sister Hilda sighs. "Aren't we all?" The shortage means no cheese today, just prep work. You clean tools, scrape rinds, and make new labels for the aging shelves. While you work, you notice one of the younger sisters sketching something in the corner on a bit of parchment. You glance over. It's a comic of a wheel of cheese running away from a knife, shouting, "You'll never bring me down." You wheeze. Sister Beatrix blushes. "Don't tell." You promise not to, on the condition that she lets you keep a copy. It ends up tucked inside your notebook, between the page about mold and the list of your top 5 favorite cheese rinds. Here's the thing no one tells you. For all its holy rigidity, convent life allows space for small rebellions. Quiet ones. Cheese comics. Secret recipes. Barrel experiments. A second helping when no one's looking. You begin to see them everywhere. Like the time Sister Juliana, accidentally, mixed honey into the fresh curd and called it a mistake, but it was divine. Or the time someone rearranged the spice labels to spell out, "Bless this mess." Historians often miss these moments. They focus on the official records, the big names, the wars, the papal decrees. But the daily magic happens in the margins. Like the anonymous nun who doodled a snail fighting a knight in the corner of an antiphonary. Or the countless women who used their cheese journals as emotional diaries, tracking not just weigh and weight, but moods, dreams, even crushes. Yes, nun crushes. They happened. One such note reads, "Saw her at the well. She smiled. Forgot entirely what I came for. Likely died of thirst." It's not salacious. It's human. And somehow that humanity gets folded into the cheese, like thyme and salt, an unspoken ingredient that changes everything. You begin collecting these marginalia. Not stealing them, just copying. One a day, into the back of your notebook. You've started calling it your grimoire of dairy mischief. One entry reads, "Cows will not be bribed, but goats can be reasoned with." Another, "Today I dropped a wheel. It rolled into the cellar. I have named it Elijah. It may return." During a particularly long afternoon, you're sent to assist Sister Mathilde with inventory. She's nearly blind, but sharp as a whetstone. Together, you count wheels, sniff rinds, and make guesses about texture by tapping them like ancient drums. "Always trust your ear," she says. "A hollow wheel lies." At one point, she pauses beside the shelf where your secret wine barrel cheese should be, but isn't. You panic, then realize it's hidden, tucked in the old barrel, out of sight. But she lingers. "Something smells like ambition," she says. You say nothing. Just nod. She doesn't press. Just smiles a little. You decide to bring her a sliver when it's ready. That evening, thunder grumbles over the hills. The cloister gets dark early, and the storm turns the chapel into a cave of flickering shadows. During Compline, the wind rattles the windows, and the chanting feels more like a spell than a prayer. You imagine your cheese, alone in the barrel, storm whispering through the crack, air changing everything. It feels mythic. That night, you dream about it. It's enormous, glowing, floating just above the ground. The cat sits beside it, purring like a hymn. Sister Magda floats by and says, "Told you not to name it." You wake with your hand clutching the notebook. In the candlelight, you flip to a new page and write, Day 189. It's time. You wait until the next evening. After prayers. After cleaning. After the others have gone to their cells. You return to the barrel, candle in hand. You pry it open. The smell hits first, bold, layered, unapologetic. Then the sight. It's smaller than you remember, more compact, like it curled into itself while aging. The rind is firm, speckled with a faint bloom of ivory mold. The edges are stained with the faintest hue of wine, like a sunset in winter. You press a finger to it. Yielding. You slice it. The paste inside is creamy, dappled, marbled in a way that feels accidental and perfect. You take a tiny bite. It tastes like confession, like forgiveness, like something earned. You sit there, in the dim light, and cry a little. Not because it's sad, because it worked. Because something you made, quietly, secretly, patiently, is real. And you think maybe this is how God feels. The next morning, your steps feel lighter. You move through the motions of convent life like someone carrying a delicious secret. The sort that hums beneath your ribs and keeps you warm even when the cloister stones feel like ice. You don't tell anyone about the tasting. Not yet. Not even Sister Juliana, who would understand, or Sister Beatrix, who might immortalize the cheese in a cartoon titled, The Brisaya Has Risen. Instead, you wrap the remaining wedge in beeswax cloth, mark it with a tiny star, and place it at the back of the cheese cave behind a stack of wheels named things like St. Mildred's Mercy and Sour Judith. You tell yourself you'll share it soon. Just not yet. That day, you're assigned to the herb garden. A penance, maybe, or just a rotation. Either way, it's muddy, and the mint is attempting a coup. While yanking out a particularly smug root, you hear a quiet oof behind you. It's Sister Agnes, the archivist. She's holding a stack of parchment almost as tall as her forehead. "I need someone with clean hands," she says, eyeing your muddy gloves. "Or at least opposable thumbs." You wash up and follow her to the scriptorium. Turns out, she's unboxing something unusual, a bundle of texts donated by a nearby abbey that recently shuttered its dairy operation. "Couldn't keep the cows. Or the cows couldn't keep them," she mutters. The top scroll is labeled, On the Divine Preservation of Soft Cheeses. You snort. She smirks. But as you unroll it, the handwriting arrests you. Loopy, but precise. Full of theological flourishes, little crosses at the start of every paragraph. The content is half recipe, half sermon. One line reads, "As milk must be stirred to avoid burning, so must the soul be tended by gentle correction." You're in love. The rest of the day disappears into ink and vellum. You discover texts detailing not only cheesemaking but the politics of dairy in ecclesiastical circles. Apparently, a schism once occurred in a neighboring priory over the use of juniper ash versus walnut ash on their rinds. Ashgate, you call it in your notes. Historians still debate whether that conflict was theological or purely gustatory. Some say it was a metaphor for corruption and purity. Others suspect the monks just got really competitive. Either way, it led to a split. One group formed a new abbey. Their cheese, smokier, darker, wrapped in black cloth. Their motto, from fire, flavor. You're not sure whether to laugh or light a candle in their honor. More documents reveal that medieval nunneries often used cheese not just as sustenance, but as currency. Wheels were traded for ink, tools, even relics. One abbess allegedly offered a 12-month-aged cheddar to acquire what was supposedly the finger bone of Saint Bernard. It turned out to be a pig knuckle. She kept it anyway. Back in the cheese cave, the wheels hum with new meaning. You look at each one now not just as food, but as history, as economy, as prayer. Every crack and blemish a potential clue to who made it, what was happening in the world, how much hope or fear went into its shaping. Later that week, you catch Sister Magda staring at the shelf where you hid your wine barrel cheese. She doesn't say anything, just hums one of the old Gregorian tunes and shuffles away. You consider confessing. Instead, you distract yourself by helping Sister Beatrix draw a new series of cheese saints. There's Saint Camemberta, patroness of blooming rinds. Saint Chiderius, who bears the keys to the cave. And your favorite, Saint Rhindolan the slightly squishy, known for his short sermons and extremely aged wisdom. As evening falls, the air grows cooler. Rain seeps into the walls again. Everything smells of damp wool and thyme. You return to the scriptorium, but Sister Agnes is gone. The scrolls are left stacked neatly, save for one left open. It's written in a dialect older than Latin, somewhere between prayer and poem. You translate slowly. The wheel is a circle and a cell. What enters it does not leave unchanged. Be thou like milk, willing to break, that thou might be made whole. You copy that into your notebook. It resonates. Because lately, you've felt like you're changing. Ripening, maybe. Becoming something quieter, deeper. Something with layers. You visit the wine barrel one last time before bed. The cheese inside is cooler now, firming in the evening chill. You brush your fingers over the rind. It feels like leather and memory. You decide tomorrow is the day. You'll slice it for the sisters. Let them taste it. Let them know what you've made. You're scared. Not of rejection, but of letting go. Because once it's shared, it's no longer yours. It becomes theirs too. And maybe that's the point. You whisper a short prayer over it, not formal, just heartfelt. Bless this wheel. May it nourish. May it surprise. May it not explode. Then you smile. Because even if it did explode, you'd still call it a miracle. You slip back to your cell. The cloister is silent, save for the faint groan of the wind and a single, wandering meow echoing through the hall. You fall asleep dreaming of cheese-shaped halos and saints with butter knives. Morning light slips through the narrow window of your cell like a soft, pale ribbon. You lie still, savoring the quiet moment before the day's bustle returns. Clanging of buckets, echo of chants, the ever-present scent of damp stone and aging parchment. Today is the day. You dress slowly, pulling on your habit with reverence and maybe a little nervous energy. The cheese, your secret, your late-night prayer, is waiting in the cave, wrapped carefully in beeswax cloth with a tiny star you painted on it. You clutch your notebook, as if it's a shield. At breakfast, The sisters chatter about the weather, the harvest, the latest shipment of medicinal herbs. You smile and nod, trying not to seem distracted. But the cheese is all you can think about. After the first prayers and the morning chores, you gather the sisters in the refectory. The long wooden table is polished and bare except for a single platter and a small knife, a relic borrowed from the kitchen, its handle worn smooth by years of use. You unwrap the cheese slowly, ceremoniously. The beeswax crackles quietly like a whispered secret. The star gleams faintly under the flickering candlelight. Sister Hilda raises an eyebrow. "What's this?" You swallow. "It's a cheese," you say, voice low. There's a pause. Then Sister Magda leans forward, eyes bright. "From the wine barrel?" You nod. One by one, the sisters take turns slicing a small piece, passing it around with quiet reverence. The first bite is a hush. Then surprise. Then smiles. Sister Agnes closes her eyes. It's like the earth itself has folded into it. Sister Beatrix laughs softly. A wheel of holy mystery. You catch Sister Juliana's eye. She winks. You might be onto something. Over the meal, the conversation turns to cheese, its textures, its flavors, its strange, ancient symbolism. You share your discoveries from the scrolls, the politics, the recipes, the lore. Sister Agnes reads aloud from the poem about the wheel and the cell. Historians still argue whether cheese was seen primarily as sustenance or spiritual metaphor in medieval convents, but tonight, it feels like both. By the end of the meal, you realize the cheese has done more than nourish. It has woven a thread of joy and wonder through the community. You sit back, content. As the sun sets behind the cloister walls, the cats curl up beside you, purring like ancient chants. You open your notebook and add a final line for today. Day 190. A wheel shared is a miracle made manifest. The days that follow settle into a gentle rhythm, as if the cheese has cast a quiet spell over the convent. You notice subtle shifts everywhere, more laughter during chores, lighter steps in the corridors, even the cats seem to purr a little louder, if such a thing is possible. You continue your duties, but your heart lingers often on the dairy. One morning, you find a small envelope slipped under your cell door. Inside, a note in Sister Beatrix's bubbly handwriting reads, "Your cheese inspired a new hymn. Ready to hear it." Later that day, during Vespers, the sisters gather as usual, but this time, instead of the usual chants, they sing a softly humorous song about the trials and triumphs of cheesemaking. The melody is catchy, with verses praising the humble way and gentle rinds, and a chorus that humorously warns of the curse of the runaway curd. You grin as you listen. Who knew cheese could inspire poetry? Meanwhile, your grimoire of dairy mischief grows thicker, filled with new notes, sketches, and even recipes for experimental cheeses that some sisters promise to try in secret. But not everyone is enchanted. One afternoon, the abbess summons you. Her eyes, sharp beneath the heavy veil, study you with a mixture of curiosity and caution. "You've been busy," she says, voice calm but firm. You nod. She gestures to the scrolls you found. Knowledge is a gift, but also a responsibility. We must remember that the sacred and the mundane often intertwine in ways not everyone understands. Her words linger. Later, in the quiet of the herb garden, you reflect on that. How cheese, so earthy, so everyday, could carry sacred meaning. How the nuns before you saw it as a symbol of transformation, patience, even holiness. Historians still argue whether these writings were sincere spiritual expressions or coded satire. Some believe the humor and playfulness in the texts were a form of resistance to strict religious dogma. Others see them as genuine devotion. Perhaps it's both. That evening, you light a candle by your desk and pen a new entry. Day 195. Cheese is more than food. It is story, spirit, and, sometimes, subversion. Outside, the wind picks up again, swirling through the cloister like a soft reminder that life is ever-changing, just like the molds on your aging wheels. You smile to yourself. And you wonder what new stories tomorrow's cheese will tell. You start to notice that the cheese has become something of a communal talisman. Not just nourishment, but a symbol of the small joys that sneak past the austere routine of convent life. Even Sister Mathilde, who usually dismisses any novelty with a raised eyebrow, admits to savoring the occasional slice, declaring it a welcome disruption. One morning, as the sun filters weakly through stained glass, you're summoned to the infirmary. Sister Agnes is there, reclining on a cot, looking pale but determined. She beckons you over with a crooked finger. "I've been studying your cheese notes," she says. "There's something fascinating here about the use of herbs in the rinds: thyme, rosemary, even lavender. These were not just for flavor, but for preservation and healing." You nod, intrigued. She pulls out an ancient manuscript, its edges frayed, filled with recipes for medicinal cheeses. "We think some nunneries used cheese as a delivery system for remedies," she explains. "Imagine a slice that soothes your stomach or calms your nerves." You imagine how clever that is. Medicine disguised as a treat. The perfect recipe for compliance, and perhaps a little rebellion against the harshness of medieval life. Later, while stirring a fresh batch of curds, you catch a glimpse of a rare visitor, a local noblewoman who's taken to frequenting the convent. Her visits are quiet but purposeful, and you overhear that she's interested in commissioning a special cheese blend for her estate. This sparks an interesting debate among the sisters. Should the convent engage in such worldly trade? Some argue that producing cheese for outsiders could fund charitable works and upkeep. Others fear it would compromise the spiritual purity of their vocation. Historians still argue whether medieval nunneries acted more as spiritual sanctuaries or savvy economic enterprises. The truth likely lies somewhere in the rich, creamy middle. You decide to experiment with new flavors for the noblewoman, a blend with hints of juniper and wildflower honey. You imagine her surprise at tasting something both familiar and utterly new. That evening, the convent hums with quiet anticipation. You tuck your notebook away, your mind swirling with possibilities. As you lie down, the faint scent of lavender and aged cheese mingles in the cool night air. It's comforting, like an old friend's whispered secret. You drift off, dreaming of cheese wheels rolling through lush fields, carrying the weight of centuries and stories yet to be told. Morning light greets you gently as you prepare to continue your cheese experiments. The noblewoman's commission has set your imagination alight, and the convent is abuzz with whispered excitement and quiet support. Even Sister Mathilde, once the harshest critic, is now offering surprisingly useful advice about aging techniques. You trudge to the cheese cave with your latest creation, a wheel infused with wild herbs and honey, wrapped carefully in linen dyed with indigo. The scent is complex, sweet, earthy, and faintly floral. You feel a small thrill as you place it alongside the older wheels. That day, you find yourself wandering to the cloister's library, a quiet sanctuary of dust and parchment. You're drawn to an old, forgotten volume bound in cracked leather. Opening it carefully, you discover a collection of letters exchanged between abbesses centuries ago, discussing not only spiritual matters but also their cheese production strategies. One letter mentions a curious experiment: cheese aged in a cave with bat guano. You blink, because, yes, that's exactly what it sounds like. Apparently, the ammonia-rich environment affected the flavor and texture uniquely. You laugh softly. Medieval chefs had some wild ideas. Historians still debate the accuracy of these letters, whether they were genuine correspondence or allegorical tales meant to illustrate virtues like patience and fortitude through dairy metaphors. But either way, the texts offer a fascinating glimpse into the everyday lives and challenges of these women. Back in the refectory, you gather the sisters to share your new cheese. The noblewoman is due to visit soon, and you want their honest opinions. The tasting is a symphony of reactions: surprise, delight, a few puzzled frowns. Sister Juliana notes a floral sweetness that reminds her of spring meadows. Sister Beatrix sketches a cartoon of a bee and a wheel sharing a secret handshake. As you listen, you realize how much cheese has become a language, one that connects you to centuries of women who found joy, sustenance, and meaning in the humble curd. That night, you write in your notebook. Day 210. Cheese is a story written in flavor and time. Every bite is a whisper from the past. Outside, the wind rustles the cloister's ancient trees, carrying the scent of wild herbs and fresh rain. You smile, knowing that tomorrow holds more secrets to uncover, more stories to savor. The noblewoman arrives on a crisp autumn morning, her cloak swirling like a falling leaf as she steps into the convent courtyard. Her presence feels almost like a ripple in the stillness, a reminder that the world outside the stone walls moves on, faster and louder. You guide her to the cheese cave, proud yet nervous. The air is cool and fragrant with the mingling aromas of aging curds and earthy moss. She picks up the indigo-wrapped wheel you prepared, turning it over in her hands with a discerning eye. Then, with a delicate smile, she slices a thin wedge and tastes it. Her eyes close for a moment, and when she opens them, there's a softness there, a surprise. "This is unlike anything I've ever tasted," she says quietly. "A poem in cheese." You almost laugh. A poem, really? As she moves through the cave, sampling the other wheels, the sisters gather nearby, their faces glowing with pride and anticipation. The noblewoman confides that she hopes to bring some of this magic back to her estate, to revive traditions lost to time and commerce. You realize that your cheese, once just an experiment born from curiosity and late-night prayers, has become a bridge between worlds, the sacred and the secular, past and present. Later, as the sun dips low, the abbess invites you to her chambers. She thanks you for your dedication and courage. "Remember," she says, "history isn't just in books. It lives in our hands, our meals, our daily rituals. You've reminded us of that." Historians still debate the true influence of medieval nunneries on regional economies, but your experience suggests it was profound and personal. That night, as you write your final entries, you feel a quiet peace. The cloister feels warmer somehow, as if the stones themselves have softened. You close your notebook and look out the window at the stars. They twinkle with the same gentle mystery as the cheese wheels aging below. Your journey with cheese has taught you more than recipes or history. It's taught you about transformation, connection, and the simple miracles tucked into everyday life. You whisper a final prayer of thanks, then settle into your bed. Tomorrow, who knows? Maybe another secret waits to be uncovered in the humblest places. The days slowly wind down, and you find yourself savoring the calm moments between chores, prayers, and quiet reflection. The once intimidating task of uncovering medieval cheese lore now feels like a gentle companion, a comforting hum beneath the convent's usual rhythm. You walk through the cloister gardens, where the scent of herbs mingles with damp earth, the same earth that nurtured the grass that fed the cows whose milk began this whole delicious story. Your notebook, now thick with observations, poems and recipes, sits on your desk, a treasure chest of curiosity and care. Sometimes, you catch yourself smiling at the memory of Sister Beatrix's curse of the runaway Curdim, or the noblewoman's delighted surprise at the indigo-wrapped wheel. Cheese has become more than sustenance or scripture. It's a symbol of the hidden lives and quiet resilience of those medieval nuns who, against the odds, found joy and meaning in everyday miracles. You close your eyes, feeling the soft hum of the convent around you, the gentle scrape of a quill, the distant toll of a bell, the faint rustle of a parchment page turning. Historians still argue about the precise reasons medieval nuns wrote so much about cheese, whether it was spiritual metaphor, practical instruction, or playful code, but perhaps the truth is simply that cheese was life. It was hope, sustenance, community, and sometimes even rebellion wrapped in a rind. As you drift toward sleep, the soft scent of aged cheese and beeswax lingers in the air, wrapping you in a warm, familiar embrace. Tomorrow, the world will continue spinning, and history will keep whispering its secrets. But for now, you rest, cradled by the stories of cheese and the quiet strength of those who came before. You breathe deeply, slow your heart, and let the gentle night carry you away. Sweet dreams. Now, as your eyelids grow heavy and the world softens into shadows, imagine the cool stone walls of the convent cloister embracing you like an old friend. Feel the delicate fragrance of wild herbs mingling with the faint, comforting aroma of aging cheese, both ancient and alive, whispering stories in a language older than time itself. Let your breath deepen and slow, matching the gentle rhythm of a candle's flicker, steady and warm. You're cradled in a moment suspended between history and dream, where the mundane becomes magical and the past reaches out like a soft hand. The voices of the sisters, their quiet laughter and whispered prayers, fade into a lullaby carried on a gentle breeze. Outside, the night sky twinkles with distant stars, silent witnesses to centuries of secrets, joy, and transformation. Rest now, knowing you have traveled through time and tasted the hidden sweetness of forgotten worlds. Tomorrow the stories will wait, but for now, surrender to the quiet hum of the night. Good night.